People assumed the date would end within 10 minutes. After all, what could a lonely billionaire CEO possibly have in common with a widowed, single-dad cruise captain? Victoria Sinclair had spent 15 years building one of the world's largest luxury hospitality companies. She owned skyscrapers, resorts, private islands, and enough wealth to buy almost anything, everything, except someone who genuinely cared about her. Every man she met admired her fortune before noticing her smile. Every dinner felt like another business meeting. Every relationship ended the same way, lonelier than before. Meanwhile, Captain Adrian Hayes lived a life that couldn't have been more different. He commanded one of the world's finest luxury cruise ships when he wasn't sailing. He spent every free moment raising his 8-year-old daughter, Emma. To Adrian. Success wasn't measured in money. It was measured by whether Emma laughed before bedtime, and she always did. It all started because of one stubborn grandmother. Margaret Sinclair had watched her granddaughter hide behind work for years. One Sunday afternoon, she placed a photograph on Victoria's desk. "I've found someone." Victoria barely looked up from her laptop. "I'm not interested. You always say that. I'm serious." "So am I." Margaret smiled. "Just one dinner." Victoria sighed. "Who is he?" "A cruise captain." Victoria looked up for the first time. A captain? And a single father. She almost laughed. "Grandmother, I run multinational companies. What would I even talk about with a cruise captain?" Margaret folded her arms. "Maybe something other than money." 3 days later, Adrian received a phone call while preparing breakfast for Emma. His older sister laughed before he even answered. "I set you up on a blind date." Adrian nearly dropped the frying pan. "You what?" "She's kind, successful, and she needs someone real." "I don't even know her." "You will." Before Adrian could protest, the call ended. Emma looked up from the kitchen table. "Daddy, are you going on a date?" Adrian smiled awkwardly. "I think so." Emma grinned. "You should wear the white captain's jacket. It makes you look handsome." Adrian laughed. "I'll keep that in mind." Friday evening arrived. Victoria chose one of the city's finest restaurants. She expected someone trying desperately to impress her. Instead, a tall man walked in wearing a simple navy blazer over a white shirt. No designer watch, no expensive jewelry, no bodyguards, only quiet confidence. He smiled politely. "You must be Victoria. And you must be Adrian." He pulled out her chair before sitting down. No rehearsed compliments, no awkward flirting, no mention of her company. Instead, he asked, "How was your day?" Victoria blinked. No one had asked her that in years. Most people wanted investment advice or business opportunities. Adrian simply wanted to know how she was. She answered honestly. "Long," he smiled. "I understand. The ocean has difficult days, too. For some reason." That made her laugh. It was the first genuine laugh she'd had in months. Dinner felt unexpectedly comfortable. Adrian told funny stories about storms at sea, passengers celebrating anniversaries, children seeing dolphins for the first time. Victoria found herself listening more than speaking. When the bill arrived, she reached for it automatically. Adrian gently stopped her. "I invited you." "I'll pay." Victoria frowned. "You don't have to." "I know. I want to." She didn't argue, not because of the money, because she realized. He wasn't trying to impress her. He was simply being himself. Outside the restaurant, Victoria expected Adrian to ask for another date immediately. Instead, he smiled warmly. "I had a wonderful evening." "So did I. If you'd ever like coffee, call me." Then he walked toward the harbor parking lot. No pressure, no expectations. Victoria watched him leave. Somehow, she wished he'd stayed a little longer. Over the following weeks, Coffee became a tradition every Wednesday afternoon, sometimes at a quiet cafe overlooking the marina, sometimes while walking along the waterfront. Adrian never treated Victoria like a billionaire. He teased her when she took work calls during coffee. He reminded her to enjoy sunsets instead of checking emails. Once, he even switched off her phone. She stared at him in disbelief. "You turned off my phone. You've answered 14 calls in 20 minutes. You needed a break." She should have been angry. Instead, she smiled. Maybe he was right. One afternoon, Victoria finally asked the question she'd been wondering about. "Why have you never asked about my company?" Adrian looked out toward the sea. "Because that's what you do. I wanted to know who you are." The answer stayed with her for days. For the first time, someone cared about Victoria Sinclair, not CEO Victoria Sinclair. Emma became curious. "Daddy, who's Victoria? A friend. Is she nice?" Adrian smiled. "Very." Emma thought for a moment. "Can I meet her someday?" Adrian looked surprised. "If she's comfortable. I'd like that." He had no idea. That meeting would change all three of their lives forever. The following Saturday, Captain Adrian Hayes parked his pickup truck outside a quiet botanical garden overlooking the harbor. Emma jumped out first, clutching a small bouquet of wildflowers she had picked herself. "Daddy, do you think she'll like these?" Adrian smiled. "I think she'll love them." A few moments later, Victoria arrived. She wasn't wearing an expensive business suit. For the first time, she wore a simple cream-colored sweater and jeans. Emma ran toward her before Adrian could stop her. "Hi, I'm Emma." Victoria smiled nervously. "So you're the little girl your daddy never stops talking about." Emma giggled. "He talks about you too." Adrian laughed awkwardly. "I think that's enough honesty for one afternoon." All three of them laughed, for the first time in years. Victoria felt something she couldn't describe. Peace. The afternoon passed effortlessly. They fed ducks by the lake, shared sandwiches on a wooden bench. Emma insisted Victoria help her build a tiny sandcastle near the shoreline when the castle finally collapsed. Emma laughed instead of crying. Victoria looked at Adrian. "She's wonderful." Adrian smiled proudly. "She's the best thing that's ever happened to me." Victoria quietly looked away. She suddenly realized she had spent years building companies, but had never built a family. Over the next few months, Wednesday coffees became Saturday breakfasts. Saturday breakfasts became Sunday walks, without realizing it. The three of them had formed a routine. Emma started calling Victoria whenever she had exciting news. Victoria attended Emma's school art exhibition. She even helped her choose a birthday dress. People began assuming they were already a family. Neither Adrian nor Victoria corrected them. Not everyone was happy. Victoria's executive board certainly wasn't. One director spoke bluntly. "Our investors don't like this relationship. You're dating a cruise captain. It damages your public image." Victoria calmly closed the meeting folder. "No, it improves my life." The room fell silent. For the first time, she didn't care what anyone thought. Meanwhile, Adrian continued working aboard the luxury cruise ship. One evening, a violent storm struck during an international voyage. Passengers panicked, children cried, crew members rushed across the decks. Captain Adrian remained completely calm. For nearly 8 hours, he safely guided the massive ship through towering waves. By sunrise, every passenger had reached port safely. News channels praised his leadership. Victoria watched every report, not because he was famous, but because she had spent the entire night terrified she might lose him. When Adrian finally called, she answered before the first ring ended. "I'm okay," he said softly. Victoria closed her eyes in relief. "I know. I just needed to hear your voice." Neither of them spoke for several seconds. Sometimes, silence says everything. A week later, Emma surprised them both. During dinner, She placed two drawings on the table. One showed herself holding Adrian's hand. The other showed Victoria standing beside them. Above all three figures, she had written one sentence in colorful letters. My family. Victoria stared at the drawing. Tears slowly filled her eyes. She looked toward Adrian. I don't want to confuse her. Adrian gently shook his head. You didn't. You simply became someone she loves. Emma quietly reached across the table and held Victoria's hand. I've never had a mommy, but, she smiled shyly. I think you'd be really good at it. Victoria couldn't hold back anymore. She wrapped Emma in a gentle hug. For years, she had believed success meant owning more companies. Now, she realized happiness was sitting across the dinner table. A few weeks later, Adrian invited Victoria to the harbor where his cruise ship was preparing for its next voyage. As the sun began setting, they stood alone on the observation deck overlooking the ocean. This is my favorite place, Adrian said, when life gets noisy. I come here. Victoria smiled. And now you've brought me. He nodded. Because you're part of my peace. She looked into his eyes. No one has ever treated me the way you have. You never cared about my money. You never tried to impress me. You simply saw me. Adrian gently took her hand. Because that's all I ever wanted. The woman, not the title. Tears rolled down Victoria's cheeks, I think. I'm in love with you. Adrian smiled warmly. I've been in love with you for a long time. The harbor breeze surrounded them as they embraced beneath the golden sunset. 6 months later, their wedding wasn't held in a luxury ballroom. It took place aboard Adrian's cruise ship, crew members, close friends, Emma and Victoria's grandmother. Everyone celebrated together. Emma proudly walked down the aisle carrying the rings. When the ceremony ended, she hugged both of them tightly. I told you Daddy looked handsome in his captain's jacket. Everyone laughed. Victoria looked at Adrian, then at Emma, then toward the endless blue ocean. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel like the lonely billionaire CEO. She felt like a wife, a mother, and finally, home.